Hello, and welcome to Gardener's World. As Monty said last week, we are trying our best to keep the programme on air for you. So the next couple of weeks, you've got me. And if I'm honest, it feels even more of a privilege than it does normally. We all know we're living in very strange and uncertain times. And for me, it's made me realise even more so that the garden brings a sense of normality to my life. And I found myself just lingering so much more on the detail of what's going on. And the woodland's been beautiful. Look what's in front of me. The Euphorbia robbii has just come alive, and that beautiful acid green. I've got primulas popping up all over the place. But one of the things that's really stood out and just put a massive smile on my face is the hellebores. Look at them. They just sit there, delicately moving in the wind, and you even get the sense that the flowers are slightly shy. They dangle down. And I'm just going to start to add a few more hellebores to the woodland area. But I'm going to have a little bit of experiment. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to plant 1 or 2 youngsters in this space, and with the others I'm going to grow them on, put them in next year and see what the difference is. Because that's what gardening is all about, isn't it? About experimenting, about playing. And more than anything, gardening's got to be about hope, hasn't it? And we definitely need some of that at the moment. On today's programme, Rachel starts on a project she's been dreaming about for years, her very own kitchen garden. And we step into the competitive world of daffodil showing, where after months of preparation, only a best in show will do. It's that time of year. Plants are actually starting to come out the ground, and you've got a little bit of sun on your face. And I've been busy the last few days just mulching these beds, and to be honest, it's a job that I've normally got done by now. I start mulching, say, September time and just work my way through the winter. But about back end of November, I walked out here on a Saturday morning, and it was as if the tide had come in from the east coast. This part of the garden was virtually underwater for 3 months. But that said, it's nothing compared to what some people have had to deal with. And my heart really does go out to them, especially with what's happening now. The borders, though, do seem to be coming back well. I might lose a few plants, but right now, there's some real signs of recovery. For me, this mulching is incredibly important. Look after your soil and put the work into it, you'll get so much more out of it. I mulch just with well-rotted horse manure, but you can use lots of different things, whether that be your own leaf mould, your own compost. Tend to put a good couple of inches on. And I do understand that it can be a costly exercise, but even if you can't do every year, do every other year or every 3rd year, I promise you that your plants will really benefit. So we mulch through. Also, you might see these little strange canes all around my garden. They are there for a reason, I promise you. They're to remind me that I need to do certain things. Maybe I'm getting to that age where I sort of have these really good ideas all the way through the winter months, and then I walk out the garden in spring and go, right, what was it I was going to do? But these ones are to remind me that I didn't like where these grasses were last year, so I want to move them. Great time of year if you want to move any of the grasses in your garden. Really good time. They prefer to be moved just as there's some warmth in the soil and they're starting to grow away. And I know there's a little spot where I just want to develop a clump of this Calamagrostis. And actually that's come out quite nice and easy. much soil as possible. Get the last one out. So there you go, that's that. Funny, isn't it? You know someone for an awful long time. You even build a garden next to them at the Chelsea Flower Show, but you don't know that they've been carrying the same dream as you. And Rachel is exactly that person, and it involves one of these.
I've gardened in many places, from a suburban semi to a roof terrace, sometimes even just window boxes on a balcony. But I've always had a dream, and that was to have a walled kitchen garden. And now it is a reality. We've been here a few years, but I haven't been able until now to really get started. And this is the year. So the plan is for me to be able to grow plenty of fresh produce. I want vegetables and salads, I want fruit, herbs, and also cut flowers in the way that you would have had in an old wall garden like this. The scrubby grass and bramble will have to be cleared in preparation for raised beds before I can start gardening here in earnest. But there are plenty of other jobs I can get on with in the meantime. With a little moral support from Woodopus, our curious cat. Come on. Now, given that I can't yet sow directly into the ground, I'm trying to think of all the things I can start growing just to give myself a head start. And this is a really good trick for sowing peas. In bits of guttering, these offcuts that I found. And I think I first heard about this tip from Jeff Hamilton. I think it was in one of his books, and I seem to remember reading it after I'd had a baby, which makes it a long time ago. Old tricks are the best ones. Right, so I'm just filling this piece with compost. I've just sort of blocked this bit off to stop the compost falling out with a bit of duct tape. And I've left a little bit of a hole there for some drainage. And then at the other end, there, I've just put one hole in there. Now this one is a sugar snap called Nairobi. My kids absolutely love them. All I'm going to do is use my finger to just sort of dib some holes in. Fairly close you can grow peas. And then just drop a pea into each hole. And the great thing about sowing them in guttering like this is because peas need individual sort of modules because they don't like the root disturbance. This is just a neater way of doing it. The trick is, once these have nicely germinated, you've got your lovely little seeds growing away, all nice and leafy, and you want to get them into the ground, then you dig a sort of narrow trench in the bed, and using, here's the next piece of guttering I'm going to sow, using another piece, you sort of push that in along the side and use that to sort of push them along and slide them into your pre-prepared little trench. Some of the walls of the kitchen garden date back hundreds of years, creating an ideal growing environment within them. And the outside face is sunny and bright, making it an ideal place for fruit trees. I've decided I'm going to put these oblique apple cordons in. And I wanted to do that because it means I'll get lots of different varieties along this wall. I can have something for eating, for cooking, for juicing. It'll be great. Growing an apple tree as a cordon just means that it's been trained on a single stem and pruned to a tight framework of short branches. They take up very little space, and so they're perfect for a small garden. The soil itself is great. It's just had a little bit of organic material added to it. I've also put the wires up on the wall, and these need a bit of space. Don't put them too close so that you get plenty of air circulation behind the plants. And then I've already got the bamboos in. They go in first so that then they're the guide for where you're going to plant the apples. Now, I'm using bare root maiden whips, which means that they're a year old, and they come like this. This one's actually already had a good soaking, and then I put it back in the packaging because you really don't want them to dry out for very long. You want to get it in quite quickly. We're nearing the end of the season for bare root trees, but they're well worth tracking down because they're much cheaper than containerised trees and you get a wide choice of varieties. The one I'm planting is called Kids Orange Red. It's good for eating and juicing and it lasts well. So if you store it after picking in mid-October, it should keep until the new year. So now what I'm going to do is just try and get roughly the right height here. And this is actually very important. What you'll notice is there's a sort of a knobbly bit here. And that is a graft union between the rootstock, which is everything from here down, and the scion, which is everything from here up. So what you've actually got are two plants married together in a perfect relationship where the rootstock will determine the vigour of the eventual tree and the top part determines the variety. So in this place, we've got a rootstock that's fairly dwarfing, which I think is perfect for this because this is about a 6-foot wall. Very important that you don't bury the graft union because what you don't want is for this part, the scion, to start sending out roots here because then you're not getting the benefit of the rootstock. What I need to do now is reduce it right down. This is formative pruning right at the beginning, and I'm going to do that to about a metre or so from the ground. And what I want to do is encourage all of these buds you can see along the stem to break and to produce side shoots, and those are going to carry the fruit. They're going to be the fruiting spurs, and each year you continue to prune them. There we go. Right, so that's 3 done. On to the rest, and then they all get a really good watering.
First of all, I want to wish Rachel all the luck in the world. I, for one, know what it's like to take on an old walled garden and try and bring it back to life. I don't know if you caught it, a reference to Jeff Hamilton, my old boss. Isn't it lovely that this far on, that man is still influencing so many of us? But I think with everything that's going on, we might have a few new viewers. I know that I've got mates that had no interest in gardening whatsoever, that are out in their gardens now having a go, because I'm getting lots of funny texts about, Frosty, how do I grow this? Frosty, how do I grow that? So I just thought it'd be an idea to go back to basics and look at veg growing. So what I've done is I've looked for a few containers that we just had kicking around. And all I'm going to do is sow some bits and pieces that are quite quick result-wise, but you could start off on a windowsill and then you could move out to the patio and just enjoy in the kitchen. So I found this old aluminium container, which was left over from Christmas. I'm just making a few holes in the bottom of this. That means that any water that I put on top can drain through. Now what I'm going to do is fill with compost. And what I've done is I've done a soil and compost mix. But that said, if you can't get out and you can't get your hands on any compost, just some soil from the garden. Hello, mate. Hello. Did you think that was dinner or something? It's not, mate, it's compost. So, if you are going to get soil out of the garden, you know, make sure that it hasn't got big lumps of stone in it and run it through your fingers. So we fill that up. What I'm going to do is just roughly level across the top. You're paying no attention whatsoever in any of that, did you, because of that cat? Right, and then a couple of little taps. Doesn't need any more than that. So what I'm going to do now is just water that. If I do it now, I don't need to water at the end. That means the seeds are not going to be washed everywhere. And what I'm going to sow is wild rocket. Wild rocket is great because it comes again. And so what I mean by that is you'll sow it, it will come up, you can cut it and it will keep growing. But any of your quick growing crops like your salads will work well in a shallow tray. And I'm just going to generally sprinkle them. If you use garden soil, it's very likely that weed seedlings will emerge. So it's worth then sowing in rows so it's easy to tell the difference between the weeds and the seedlings. The next thing to do is to take some more of your soil or your compost, and what I do is I cover it with about 1 centimetre of compost, but I'm rubbing it between my hands so that I make sure that it's quite fine. One thing to remember if you do rocket rather than a salad is rocket does have a tendency to bolt. What I mean by that is that as the weather gets warm, it can go to seed very quickly. So once it's germinated, what I'll do is I'll keep it in a shady space and then it won't bolt so quickly. And I reckon that could keep our family going for the best part of the summer. So that's that done. And then I found another old container. I've put some Hessian in to hold the compost, and I've wetted that compost. An empty compost bag or even a bin bag would work equally well. Just make sure you punch a few drainage holes in the lining before you fill it with soil. What I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to sow some carrots. That's why I've used a deeper container. If you're going to grow something, you've got to have a deep enough container to deal with the depth of that plant. Beetroot would work in here just as well. So it really is that simple. Lastly, we'll top this off with some compost. A couple of weeks' time, it'll probably start to germinate, and it won't be that long before we are pulling carrots. So there we go. Hopefully that's a nice, straightforward, simple way to start growing your vegetables. One thing that fascinates me, though, about gardeners is where they take their passion, even to the point of obsession, growing one particular group of plants to a standard where they can take it to an exhibition to hopefully win an award. The lengths that these people go to is staggering. And last year, we went to catch up with a group of people down in Worcestershire that were doing just that.
Once I discovered daffodils, well, that was it.
It's in my blood.
You think daffodils in the garden are beautiful, but when you start growing show-type daffodils, it just opens your eyes to what daffodils are.
Well, the Daffodil Society hold one major show every year, and this year it's at Pershore College. So this is the last final minutes of everybody preparing to get ready.
The biggest flowers will be there, medium, and then the smallest. So that when I stand back, I get that optical illusion that they're all the same size.
I've been a member of the Daffodil Society for decades, and it's the oldest daffodil society in the world. It was started in 1898.
With the multi-heads, you want them all to be in one clump, I suppose, rather than them all facing different directions. So it looks like one flower rather than having lots of gaps in it.
Well, there are so many different daffodils. So what they did, they divided them up into 13 different divisions dependent on their characteristics. So whether they have a trumpet, say division 1, or a double daffodil, that's another division, 2, a small cup, and right at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the miniatures, with the backward petals, the cyclaminius division 6, so sweet and dainty and a world away from a big, brash yellow trumpet.
This one's having some cup treatment at the moment. So the cups have to be nice and round, so they've got cotton wool stuffed up them at the minute. As long as he remembers to take the cotton wool out before it's judged, we're all good.
What we're aiming for is to get the head up. We do something called clocking. When the actual flower opens, it may be off-centre like that. So you have to clock it just to try and get that top petal at 12 o'clock.
So what we do, we take a brush, wet the end and carefully take the pollen out.
Well, Cyclaminius has to point downwards, so in the heat of the room they start to come up, so if they're tied down it'll stay down, and the perianths have to sweep backwards, so that helps them to sweep backwards as well. So it's a bit of bondage, as they call it in America.
This is a Division 8, it's a Tazetta. It's notorious for having lots of florets on a stem. I think this one's got about 14 or 15, but you can see them with sort of 20, 22, 24 heads. And it's true to its name, it's an avalanche, and it's an avalanche of colour off the stem.
So the variety is called Crowndale. It's what we call a Division 4, which is a double daffodil. This is probably one of the best Division 4s that's ever been bred, partly because it's neat and it has colour.
It's called Clive Fossils, and it's a 1 white yellow. It's the best of the lot, and it's got a nice slender cup that flares at the end, and it's bright yellow. And there's not many bright yellows about.
This is Fairy Chimes. It's a Division 5 Triandrous daffodil. One of the really nice things about this is that it's got a lovely scent. It's one of my favourite daffodils.
I've been going for about 25 years. I've never seen one that's got 10 out of 10.
That one, the two petals on that are dreadful, aren't they?
Yeah.
The flower should be looking straight at you like this one. The poise of that is absolutely perfect. This one is slightly down, so it's not as good. We are looking for the perfect daffodil. When you're marking them out of 10, you very rarely find one that you give more than 9 to.
Yeah, 7.5.
7.5. If a flower got a 9, it would probably get best bloom in show. Never awarded a 10.
First sip?
Yes.
Well, this is really top secret. In this room, judges at the moment have brought in 60 of the best blooms from out in the main show into this room for the top judges to decide which one will be the best bloom in show.
We don't want that now. No, that can go. We come down to just the 3.
This is the presentation of all the trophies and the prizes. So it's really good to see all the culmination of everyone's hard work. Really exciting.
Bloom in the show. Whoa! One bloom each. All been won by Ken Harrop.
Pretty ecstatic today. Best blooming show is basically whatever exhibitor's looking for when they come to a show. I'm pretty pleased, yeah.
It got 8 out of 10. We judges can always find some minor fault, but an 8-point flower is very good. That won its division and also was champion bloom in the whole show.
Just looking at my daffodils and thinking they're not exactly award-winning. But in my defence, these only went in back end of September, October last year, and just looking at them, feeling reasonably happy with the groups. I feel that the balance is right. And they're wild daffodils, so they're smaller by nature, but they'll seed around. They'll start to do their own thing. But as you can imagine, I'm not going to stop there. As I said, I'm quite happy now with the spring colour. Then the wild flowers start to come alive, but I want to add some little jewels, little pockets of colour that just pop up through the space. What I'm going to add is some alliums. This is an allium called Violet Beauty. Lovely domed head with a flat bottom to it. But the reason I'm using it is it's scented. Very soft, mild scent, but it is scented, so it makes it quite unusual. What I did with the alliums is I potted these up September, October time. So instead of putting them straight into the garden, I've put them in containers. I do that for a couple of reasons. One is actually it's an awful lot cheaper than buying plants in the green. Also, if you imagine if I'd have put alliums in the back end of my garden that was totally and utterly flooded, they might well have suffered and rotted. And then lastly, if I plant in the green, the designer in me gets to control exactly where I put them. But I'm gonna make sure that I pick the sunnier spots because these do love sunny, well-drained conditions. There you go. That's that job done. Here's some more for your weekend. To give the seedlings the best start in life, it's important to grow them in individual pots so they've got no competition. This involves teasing them out one by one, always holding them by a true leaf rather than a seed leaf or a stem. These Nicotiana have germinated at different rates, so I'm only pricking out the larger ones at this stage. Once they're in their pots, give them a drink and keep them somewhere warm. The time has come to check my rhubarb. A few weeks back, I covered one of my plants with this terracotta falsa to help exclude the light and stimulate growth. It's now ready to harvest. The pale pink stalks are tender and sweet, ready for the perfect crumble. April is a good time to reseed any bare patches in your lawn. Break up the surface with a fork or rake, then weigh out the correct amount of seed, following the instructions on the packet. Scatter thinly over the soil and then gently rake in. Water in if no rain is forecast. And if the birds are likely to be a problem, cover with a fleece or a fine mesh until you start to see the signs of new growth. Well, that's nearly it from us this week, but I do hope you've enjoyed the programme. For me, I can still feel that sun on my back. I've had my hands in the soil, the birds are singing, and it's all felt incredibly therapeutic. And I think that is the message. If you can do it safely, over the next few weeks, get out in your garden, plant something, get your hands in the soil, sit and have a cup of tea. I'm sure that it will do you the power of good. Anyway, look after yourselves. See you next week.